Walter White. You know him, right? Mild-mannered chemistry teacher, loving father, lung cancer patient. He's easily one of the most iconic characters in TV history. But what if I told you the story most of us think we know about him is built on one giant misunderstanding?
Yeah, we've all heard it. It's the classic narrative. A decent guy, gets backed into a corner by life, by a broken system, by a terminal diagnosis, and he makes a desperate choice that sends him down this dark, spiraling path. That story? It's a lie. It's a comfortable lie, a convenient one that we tell ourselves. But the truth is, the cancer didn't create a monster. It just gave the monster that was already there permission to finally come out and play.
So this is the key, the thing you have to get. Breaking Bad is not a story of transformation. It's a story of revelation. It's about a man who uses the tragedy as the perfect excuse to become who he always deep down wanted to be. Okay, let's get into it. To really understand the monster, we have to look at the psychological blueprint, the one that was in place for 50 years, long before he ever heard a doctor say the word cancer. It all starts right here, with what the psychologist Alfred Adler called an inferiority complex. This is the engine for all of Walter's rage, this deep, nagging feeling that he's a brilliant man who the world has made completely and utterly invisible. And just look at the fuel for that fire. This wasn't just a bad week at the office. This was a lifetime of humiliation. I mean, he co-founded a company that's now worth billions, and he walked away with $5,000. A genius-level mind reduced to teaching chemistry to bored teenagers and then washing their cars at a second job. He's constantly being talked down to by his own family. All of this resentment just sits there, for decades, just simmering, waiting for a spark. This quote right here, it just nails it. That kind of pent-up anger from being ignored and underestimated, it doesn't just vanish. No, it curdles. It turns into this sick, pathological need to prove how smart you are, how powerful you are, no matter what it costs. So where did Heisenberg, this ruthless, terrifying kingpin, actually come from? Well, Carl Jung had a name for it, the shadow. It's the part of ourselves we push down into the basement. It's all the ambition, the narcissism, the raw desire for dominance that the meek Walter White persona could never, ever let out. Now this is where it gets really interesting. Look at the two sides of the same coin. On the left, you've got the ego, Walter White, the submissive, overlooked guy the world sees. And on the right, you've got the shadow, Heisenberg, dominant, feared, and empire builder. Jung's whole thing was, if you don't face your shadow and integrate it, it's going to eventually take over. And for Walter White, that's exactly what happens. So, you see, Heisenberg wasn't an invention. He was a liberation. The cancer wasn't the cause of his evil, it was the alibi. It gave Walter the excuse he'd secretly been waiting for his entire life to just stop pretending. Okay, so let's follow this. We're moving from the internal psychology to the external lies, the philosophical gymnastics Walter used to justify what he was doing, most importantly, to himself. I mean, it's a huge question, right? Because for most of the show, Walt doesn't actually see himself as the bad guy. So how does he pull off that level of self-deception? How does he look himself in the mirror every morning? The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre had a perfect term for this: bad faith. It's basically the act of lying to yourself to avoid the scary, crushing weight of your own freedom. It's pretending you don't have a choice, when in reality, you are nothing but your choices. And these are the greatest hits of Walter's bad faith. It's for my family was his #1 shield. I had no choice was his personal mantra. Every single one of these is a lie, a little story designed to let him off the hook for the choices he was actively, freely making. But eventually, those excuses start to wear pretty thin. And behind all the self-deception, there was this raw, primal motive that another philosopher, Friedrich Nietzsche, would have recognized in a heartbeat. Nietzsche called it the will to power, that fundamental drive in all of us to expand our influence, to make our mark. But Walter's version of it is, well, it's a twisted, ugly caricature. It's not the creative force of some noble genius. It's the vengeful roar of a man who's been drowning in resentment for 50 years. And this brings us to an almost Aristotelian view of character. Aristotle basically argued that we are what we repeatedly do. Walter didn't just trip and fall into being evil. He trained for it. That first lie to Skylar, that was just practice. It became a habit of deceit, which then hardened into a corrupt character. And that character, it forged his catastrophic destiny. But after all the psychology, after all the philosophy, and all the self-deception, the series gives us this one single moment of pure, unfiltered,
brutal truth. The final question is still hanging there. If it wasn't really for his family, if he always had a choice, then why? Why did he do it? Well, the answer comes from the man himself.
And there it is, the one moment of what Sartre would call good faith. He just throws away all the excuses. He did it for himself, because being the feared, respected, brilliant Heisenberg, it made him feel powerful. For the first time in his sad life, it made him feel alive.
And this is the final crucial point. That's not an apology. It's a boast. It is the ultimate declaration of his true identity. In that single moment, Walter White finally dies, and Heisenberg admits he was there the entire time. So why does this story stick with us so much? Because Walter White's journey from being invisible to being infamous, it reminds us of something really uncomfortable about ourselves.
It suggests that maybe we all have a shadow self, a version of us just waiting in the wings for the right excuse to come out. So the real question the show leaves us with isn't whether or not that darkness exists inside you. It's whether you're aware of it, or if, given the right permission slip, it will rise up and dominate you too.